You're listening to MuniCast, the podcast that discusses municipal leadership. Season 5 of MuniCast is brought to you by SaskTel's Innovation and Collaboration team. SaskTel can help you sort through the noise to create solutions that add value quickly. Whether it's reducing your environmental footprint, driving investment, community development, or just saving money, contact your SaskTel account manager to find out more. MuniCast is hosted by SUMA, the voice of Saskatchewan's hometowns. I'm Stephanie, SUMA's Education and Events Advisor, and joining me for this interview is Sean McKenzie, SUMA's Director of Advocacy Services. In Season 5 of MuniCast, we are discussing how truth and reconciliation relate to municipalities. On this episode, Cadmus Delorme and Thomas Benjoe of OneHoop join us to discuss economic reconciliation. Cadmus Delorme, a Cree and Saulteaux, is the former chief of Cowessess First Nation in southern Saskatchewan. Cadmus graduated from Cowessess Community Education Centre in 2000, and he later moved to Regina to pursue a Bachelor of Business Administration and a Certificate in Hospitality, Tourism and Gaming Entertainment Management from the First Nations University of Canada. He also completed a Master of Public Administration from the Johnson Choyama Graduate School of Public Policy. He also has an ICD.D designation from the Institute of Corporate Directors and its affiliate institution, the Kenneth Levine Graduate School of Business. Under Cadmus's leadership, Cowessess First Nation prioritized economic self-sustainability and progressed renewable energy, agriculture, and land use efficiency initiatives to create current and future business opportunities. In 2001, Cadmus faced one of his hardest moments as chief when the Saulteaux and Cree First Nation made international headlines with the discovery of potentially 751 graves near the former Maryval Indian Residential School. Shortly after, Cowessess made headlines again as the first First Nations community to sign an agreement with Ottawa that returns jurisdiction over children in care to the community. Federal legislation overhauling Indigenous child welfare was passed in 2019 and came into force last year. Cadmus is the chair of the Residential Schools Document Advisory Committee and the University of Regina Board of Directors. He serves on the Saskatchewan Gaming Corporation Board of Directors and is a 2023 Banff Forum delegate. Thomas Benjoe is an Indigenous business leader and entrepreneur from Muskopatung First Nation. He is currently a partner at OneHoop. Through his leadership, he has grown several multi-million-dollar investments across multiple sectors using his unique business models. Those investments were often made with limited resources and capital, and in one such investment, he started, scaled, and sold Saskatchewan's first Indigenous tech company for a 1,150% return. Thomas also leads several strategies in Indigenous engagement, procurement, Indigenous HR, and investments. Through the strategies he has built, he has helped to unlock many new opportunities for Indigenous business to thrive and Indigenous talent to be built sustainably. Thomas currently serves on the Board of Directors at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Board of Director of Economic Development Regina, the SIIT Indigenous Innovation Advisory Council, and a member of the Saskatchewan Roughriders Indigenous Task Group. He is the past chair of the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. Thomas recently received the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal for contributions to business and commerce, was a finalist for the 2023 Can-Do Economic Development of the Year Award, and was recognized in the Globe and Mail's report on Business magazine as a top 50 changemaker in Canada, and was recognized as one of the top 10 most influential economic developers by Treaty 4 News. Welcome, Cadmus and Thomas. Thank you very much for being here today.
Good afternoon. It's great to be with you.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada has outlined 94 calls to action, with a portion of those calls directed towards government, some to all levels of government, including municipalities. In earlier episodes of this podcast, we've discussed legal requirements for municipalities, why education is a crucial component of reconciliation, how municipalities can learn from organizations who are strengthening their engagement with Indigenous communities and individuals, and how reconciliation and governance are interconnected. When you visit the OneHoop's website, one of the first things that you see is the phrase unlocking economic reconciliation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this means?
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you and anybody listening today. I come to you from Treaty 4 territory in Regina, and land acknowledgements is something that is becoming a norm to all of us, which is a great thing in reconciliation. To unlock economic and reconciliation, it starts at the framework of where jurisdiction lies and also where we get our drivers from in our institutions that support us. And I want to explain it really quickly. For municipalities or for SUMA and everybody that benefits from being with SUMA, um, in Western Canadian worldview, the Canadian Constitution provides a very black and white jurisdiction. Section 91 gives federal jurisdiction, Section 92 gives provincial, territorial jurisdiction, and municipalities play a role within that. When it comes to Indigenous worldview, our Indigenous governing bodies, the jurisdiction is very unique. Because Indigenous people didn't agree to the Indian Act or being under Section 9124, jurisdiction is always a challenge when it comes to where economics has to come from. Some federal and provincial governments will always say, well, First Nations are a federal responsibility, or municipalities can be on the edge of a First Nation. And it's like, how do I partner? Anybody who says that Indigenous people are a federal responsibility, that's where we got to check where the truth comes from. Because sometimes we were wired differently on what the truth is. And when it comes to unlocking economic and reconciliation, this is the part that's really important is Indigenous governing bodies, Indigenous communities, and Indigenous people, we want to be a part of the economics. But the challenge is many different levels of government and jurisdiction in our country still don't know how to approach that up to economics. And so once we understand the truth and realize that we're all on a similar playing field, we just have different jurisdictions and different rights in this country, we can unlock the social and economic impact together. And it's happening. It's happening in gaming. Gaming is benefited throughout our province. It's starting to happen with purchase power agreements and renewable energy, but we got to think bigger than that. There's so much more that we can unlock.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to unlocking economic reconciliation, when I look at the team that we built within OneHoop, a lot of us are coming with experience in terms of how we've helped to unlock some of the most difficult challenges that we've seen in business and economics. And it's because we're very good at connecting and understanding issues and then challenging some of the status quo. When we look at some of the work that we've been a part of, so far, it's taking a look at things like policy and challenging it, because we've used certain policies for such a long time that it's actually come at the detriment of true economic participation from our Indigenous peoples. And so, we need to make sure that we're actually being more realistic about how we understand policy and how the processes are created within it, because there still needs to be a sense of reality in terms of how we take a policy and make sure that it's completely functional inside of an organization. And we have to challenge all of the barriers that are often within some of those processes as well. But I think being able to do that and having a strong relationship versus just a transactional relationship helps us to unlock those opportunities more effectively.
Thanks, both of you. So I really appreciate how meaningful relationship building is kind of central to what you've set out there. And obviously there's a lot of work that needs to happen to advance Canadians' understanding of economic reconciliation in order to build a lot of those relationships, whether those be with the corporate sector or governments or First Nations communities. So what are some of the methods that you use to achieve this relationship building?
In terms of relationship building, like when we first started OneHoop, a lot of the organizations I often have to share with them, I'm not a consultant. I'm not going to come in and I have a tough time sitting and trying to facilitate. We're connectors, and we're working more as advisory in terms of really building an understanding of your organization so that we can build a relationship first and understanding, what are we actually trying to achieve here? And we're not just here to check a box. We're trying to figure out what the true issues are so that we can better understand how we work together in finding that solution with the organization. And that can't just happen through a contract. We have to be able to go back and forth. We have to try some things out. Some things may not work, but I think, in our ability to build that relationship with one another and understand fully what we're trying to accomplish, we're able to find those solutions. We're able to create new opportunities together. And I think that journey that we go through with each other and that relationship that we build, it becomes a lot more meaningful. And so our solution that we're trying to provide in terms of, creating economic reconciliation opportunities, it becomes more valuable to the organization and to the stakeholders that have been a part of that process.
To add on, in this country, many municipalities, governments, corporations, they measure ESG, environment, social, and governance. And one of the things that we have to understand is we also have to add an I in there for Indigenous. And that is going to be a norm in this country. And so the more that do the ESG I are going to get it right with economics and reconciliation. Certain ways that OneHoop has been helping so far, and we're 3 months old, is many corporations and organizations have a legal team. They have a lawyer that'll give the decision makers all their risks, and the decision makers make the decision. Now, these same organizations, municipalities, and governments have to have an Indigenous advisory as well. And, sometimes some have internally a position that is Indigenous, but even that position, they tend to have ceilings on it because they don't want to. Their duty of care is to grow the organization. And sometimes reconciliation can only happen with uncomfortable conversations. And so OneHoop has been that advisory so far. And then other means is getting into the procurement side of things. We got to understand Indigenous people have only been a part and welcomed of the growth in this province from the 1990s and on. So a lot of these companies that we're working with are generational. And secondly, Indigenous people usually have to work within the Indian Act, and the Indian Act is not economically friendly. So, it's happening, and OneHoop is here to unlock all of those ceilings so that there's no ceiling on business and reconciliation.
Thank you for that. I think the Indian Act not being economically friendly is perhaps the understatement of the century. Very, very well put. So I'm curious a little bit about the name OneHoop. Where does that come from, and how does that apply to economic reconciliation in your eyes?
OneHoop's, when we think about the use of the hoop or circle in our languages, a lot of the terminology in terms of what a circle is, it is translated more into a hoop. So it's a very universal shape and that's used in ceremony, that's used to, build an understanding of our worldview. And so when we talk about, our use of OneHoop, we're using that circle where we're building relationships, where we're able to create that opportunity for us to be able to work together and bring organizations, bring individuals into our hoop and be able to share and be able to develop things together in a way that's respectful and in building understanding. And then we go back out and our hoop continues to grow as we continue to work with more and more people and organizations so that we're helping to make change in the community. And, the impact that we're creating through our organization is felt by our community. So there's that's sort of the cultural and significance and also the internal culture of the team that we're building, and that they know that their job is to build those relationships and to expand our circle.
Why should municipalities be engaging with Indigenous owned and operated businesses? And how can they find out which businesses are Indigenous owned and operated?
Right now in this country, we all inherited a history together. Today, nobody created the Indian Act, nobody created residential schools. And so, when we talk about the relationship between Indigenous people, municipalities, and this country, Canadians, we just got to all understand we all inherited this together. And once you understand that, truth comes from the brain and reconciliation comes from the heart. So once we understand truth, reconciliation comes with so much more open-mindedness. And so to get to your question is how can, we bridge? Once we unlock business and reconciliation with no ceilings, our social and economic impact together in this province and country will lift. Just about every municipality in central, southeast, and northern Saskatchewan, and there's two in southwest, have a First Nation or Métis very close to their towns. And we have always coexisted together, but we still live in somewhat of silos today where we don't interact. Economics is going to help us interact. When we fully implement reconciliation and our kids benefit from it, we're going to have two relationships together. One of them is economics and the other one is quasi-jurisdictional. And so today, municipalities have the opportunity to grow the economics. If every municipality put a mandate of 10% procurement, now I'm just making this up, 10% procurement goes to Indigenous owned businesses, you'd be amazed at the relationship you'd build. And remember, Indigenous people, we don't want pity or anybody to feel sorry for us. We want parity like non-Indigenous people. But because of our history and what we inherited as Indigenous to Indigenous, sometimes economics is not, always the strongest. And that's not that we want pity or anybody to feel sorry for us. It's just the fact that we're healing in our own means. So when you do see an Indigenous economic entrepreneur, let's lift them up because helping them will help all of us as Canadians, non-Indigenous. And, Tom you could hand it off to Tom to talk about the other question that you asked.
Across the province, SaskTel is engaged with many different municipal organizations who seek to innovate. Contact your SaskTel account manager to learn more about some of these initiatives and how they can help your municipality today.
So in terms of, when we're looking at the engagement side and the question does come up on, how do we know that the Indigenous business that we're working with is truly an Indigenous owned business? And I've had several organizations as we've been working through the Indigenous procurement solution, want to gain access to databases. They want to see the organizations that are confirming Indigenous owned. But what I've shared with organizations is if you're truly committed to seeing this happen, it's a relationship that you should be building with Indigenous businesses that are local to your organization. And that you should develop your own internal policies in terms of how you view those organizations as well. When we went through this process with a very large municipality, the question did come up, and we did. I'm a former banker, so we had several processes to identify who true owners are of organizations. And I implemented that process with that municipality, and I said, look, here's how I would have done it if I was working at the bank in terms of understanding the legal arrangements and understanding who the owners are. You can implement this exact policy. And so ask for the legal documents, demonstrate that these businesses are Indigenous owned and confirm and utilize that on a go forward basis. If you're truly looking at, having those Indigenous businesses participate in your Indigenous procurement program. In some cases, we had organizations that said, well, no, we were certified through this venue or through this organization. And we said, no, that's not good enough for our process. We need to verify and vet you that you are an Indigenous owned business. And so they were forced to go through that process. And we actually did end up having some organizations not qualify as Indigenous owned businesses. But it's because we asked very specific legal documents that better understood the legal arrangements in terms of ownership. So it's important to have those processes built within your policy and teach your procurement team what that process is. And there's, we're going to be eventually sharing some tools through OneHoop on how these types of things can be done so that organizations that are going to go on this journey will at least have some starter tools to be able to use and build their own processes from.
I'm sure there will be lots of municipalities that will be looking forward to having access to those tools. You've talked about this a little bit throughout the podcast for sure. What role does learning about the true history of the lands that we inhabit play in building meaningful relationships with First Nations that are surrounding municipalities? And are there ways that they can meaningfully engage with those First Nations?
Today our education system is amazing in this country. We're generational in our education system, but as generational Canadians, our education system put us in this moment to kind of miss the truth between Indigenous people and Canadians. In 2021, when the unmarked graves were validated in Kamloops and Cowes, Merivale, and other places in this country, many Canadians at that time paused and said, maybe I should learn more about the truth between Indigenous people and Canadians. And we got to understand that all of our brains in this country were wired to kind of miss the truth between Indigenous people and Canadians. And so once we rewire and understand the truth, and that's why I say truth comes from the brain, we'd be so more understanding in the role we play with reconciliation. Indigenous people today, it's not that we lack talent. We have the talent, but we lack the resources to lift us to talented places in all different areas of our province. When you look at a budget of our province today in our annual budget, you'll see incarceration and social services is a huge part of our budget. And I'm just being truthful here. It's not that Indigenous people want pity or anybody to feel sorry for us, but majority of those two budgets are, the services are to Indigenous people in this province. So we have a pattern of really what we inherited together. In order to change that so that our children will have a true relationship benefited, we all have to start off with truth. And truth can come from number 57 in the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action. You bringing Tom and I on right now, I believe you are exercising a bit of number 57. And, we have to focus more on that in all our municipalities. On the Indigenous side, I just want to make sure and be real here. Even Indigenous people, we tend to have to, adjust, how we understand the relationship as well. It's on both sides. We all inherited this together, but we just have to understand that the more that we can just focus on economics and quasi-jurisdictional, the more our kids are going to benefit together. In reconciliation, there's 94 calls to action out there. And if a municipality wants to work with a First Nation or Métis Nation in this province, go in and start off with the relationship. Indigenous people, everything is about relationship. And you'd be amazed, if they're going into one of these celebrations like a local powwow or going to meet with the leadership or something of that nature. And I just want to be open, Suma, you got to be careful because some Indigenous leaders will state that I don't work with municipalities because that's going to be offensive to our treaty relationship. Well, you just got to understand that in some Indigenous people don't trust governments. And it's not that it was you that did it listening. It was just patterns to this moment. But, once you get past that onion layer and you just say, hey, listen, I'm not here to offend treaty. I'm just here to build a relationship. You'd be amazed at the social and economics we can grow together moving forward.
Cadmus said it best in terms of being able to build those relationships. And, we do, have that history together. And, but it's, when you do really understand that truth and start to really come from a good place and in terms of building that relationship with your local First Nations, that helps to put shields down and it helps to have more meaningful conversation about what a relationship looks like. Being able to have a deeper relationship, then we're able to come up with some better solutions for what's needed in our communities. And sometimes we have much broader issues that, are starting to come to light and, we want more of our relationship with community to come in and help to be a part of that solution. And so it takes understanding where each other's coming from in order for us to understand what resources can we actually put towards solving that problem. It takes, years of relationship building to be able to do that more effectively.
Relationship building has definitely been a theme in all of the episodes of this podcast. I think that's come up in every one that we've done in this season on truth and reconciliation. So it's nice to hear you echo that once again. And that's really a place for municipalities to start, is to just go and start building those relationships and getting to know the people around you. So you both have impressive experiences leading communities and organizations. Cadmus as the former chief of Cowessess First Nation, and Thomas as the former president and CEO for FHQ Developments. How have your experiences guided your work with OneHoop?
Thank you very much. It's instrumental in the development of OneHoop. We've pivoted a few times already. Tom and I, when we started this 3.5 months ago, when I launched it and Tom joined, we had our certain pillars that we wanted to provide based on his experience and my experience. But after getting, requests from corporate, from municipalities, for Indigenous governing bodies, we've pivoted a little bit. Like, we've actually changed our pillars for the better. And, the experience that I have being a chief for 7 years of a First Nation in this province and country is, I've worked with all levels during that time. I've worked with RNs, I've worked with municipalities, with cities, with provincial and federal government. And nobody disagrees on the end goal, that Indigenous people should have parity like every other Canadian. While our Indigenous worldview isn't tested anymore, I find is the fun part is we disagree on how to get there. So we all agree on the end goal, but we disagree on how to get there. And how you have those conversations is you sit down and put your shield down and just admit you're about to have an uncomfortable conversation. That's what reconciliation is. And even as an Indigenous leader, I couldn't get consensus from even Cowessess members that I represented. I just realized that as a leader, you just, assess and you move forward, and you assess and you move forward. And so, there's times you have to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Don't focus on the 1 step back. Just realize that that's just human nature, and that's politics and everything of that nature. But, I learned so much, and I'm so optimistic about our future together.
Yeah. And I guess, in terms of, my experience that I've gained over the years, I mean, I've always sort of worked outside the box in terms of coming up with new ways of looking at how we take on some of the biggest challenges and, Indigenous investment and business and participation and, our own economic reconciliation journeys. And so I think just those years of experience of being able to challenge status quo and always working outside the box has really helped us in this, in building OneHoop and being able to work with organizations to what they're gaining through our relationship now is they now have an organization that exists that can help work outside the box to bring solutions to their organization, that we are challenging things in a way that not to offend anyone, but in a way to build better understanding of the work that we're all trying to do together. That's what's been fantastic in, this initial first few months of being a part of OneHoop is, we don't have to take years to bring down those shields. We already have sort of instant credibility with a lot of our customers that they respect the work that we've done over the years and the experience that we're bringing into their organization to now find those solutions and be able to deepen not only their relationship with us, but to deepen their relationship with the Indigenous community.
Thank you very much. This has been a really insightful conversation, and I appreciate you both taking the time to be here today. I really like what you mentioned there about how we all agree on what the end goal is, but the struggle is figuring out the different ways to get there. Do you have any final comments that you would like to leave with our listeners before we end off our episode?
We're, on a journey ourselves, and in terms of, finding solutions for organizations. I encourage, those listening to follow us and listen in on some of the things that we have to share as we continue to grow and challenge status quo. We're going to try to share more of our successes with everyone so that everyone can at least, even if we're not directly working together, that we're finding value in building that relationship through some of the things that we're able to share. Yeah, I'm just very excited about what the future looks like. And especially for Saskatchewan, I always tell folks, I want to make sure that our province, when we talk about economic reconciliation, I want it to be known that, Saskatchewan got it right. And I want to know that, we've at least helped in some way the different organizations that exist, help them get on a different path to ensuring that we are creating the solutions here, and that we are, boots on the ground, helping to make those changes, and that we're able to actually operationalize, the things that we say. Because it's one thing to say to do something a certain way, but it's another to actually operationalize it and make it real, and then to be able to demonstrate the actual impacts over the long term. So I think that's really a personal goal of mine, and I know my colleagues would feel the same way, that we need to make sure that we get it right at home here, and then we'll see that change come from Saskatchewan and touch other parts of this country.
When reconciliation is fully implemented in our country, we will unlock our GDP by 2.5%, or $27 billion, and plus we'll add 135,000 jobs annually, and with Indigenous people fully being inclusive. That's across the country. In our province, Indigenous people are 21%. And so the more we focus on relationship and optimism on reconciliation, the more that our kids are going to thank us in the future together. Right now, our kids are coexisting in sports, in social. And so, it's up to us as the decision makers of today to realize that the most important table to talk reconciliation is the kitchen tables that every one of our kids go to in this province. OneHoop, we have extensive operational and governance experience, and we're here to help this province unlock reconciliation in business so that we can all benefit together.
Thank you very much. That is the end of our interview and the questions that I have for you. Do either of you have any questions before I let you get back to your very busy schedules?
I just want to thank you. To anybody listening, you're exercising number 57 of Truth and Reconciliation by welcoming Tom and I in. Let's keep up the, land acknowledgements, and let's, share what we're doing in TRC. And if we can't find something, then let's read them together. And, Tom and I in OneHoop, we're here to help, all of us together when it comes to economic and reconciliation.
Just, I want to thank you as well, and appreciate the opportunity to be able to share. And, I hope folks take away, some new learning today, and we look forward to, future conversations.
This brings us to the end of Season 5 of MuniCast. Thank you for tuning in to the final episode of this season. We look forward to returning with Season 6 of MuniCast in March, when we will be sharing more about SUMA and how our advocacy, resources, and partnerships can help support your municipality.